Sahana vavatu, sahanao bhunaktu, saha viryam karavavahai, tejasvinavaditam astu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May we work so that our studies become illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina Sarve Shantam Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kachit Dukhadbhag Bhavet. May all be prosperous and happy. May all be free from illness. May all achieve perfection in this life. May none suffer from miseries in this world. At the beginning of every Upanishad, there is a peace prayer, and the subject tonight is the way to peace, as if there was a kind of road and peace is there at the end of it. There's a story about a man who, in his retirement, moved into a new house. And some young boys decided that every evening they would march down the road and bang dustbins. It was a fine up to a point, but then the school holidays took over, and a gang of boys decided to do this. Big clutter, clutter, clang, clang, clang. So he decided to go out and address these boys and said, I like your music a lot, and I would like you not just to play now and then, but every evening I want you to do it. Actually, the whole day. And whenever you come to my end of the road, I will give you €1. And they were all delighted with this. But then you see, after about a week, he said to them, you know what? Cost of living has gone up. Things are very expensive. I can only afford 50 cents. So they said, it's all right, we'll still do it. So they did it for 50 cents. Then at the end of it, he said, you know, I'm a pensioner, my pension didn't come through. I can only afford 25 cents. They said, 25 cents is not worth banging the drums for 25 cents. We won't do it. And that's how he got his peace. But there's a great story in the Bhagavatam of a kite who managed to take some food and soar up into the skies and was followed and harassed left, right, and center by all the other birds, and decided, I can only get peace of mind when I let this go. So if you want a simple answer in a very short talk tonight, I can tell you the answer to get peace, the way to peace, is letting go. But letting go is one discipline that many people find very, very difficult. Very hard thing to do. I remember on one course there was a participant and he was asked to let go, and we made a small demonstration. We said, we'll stand behind you, you know, and in a self-defense posture, T posture, so with bent knees. I'll stand in the front, everybody else will stand behind, and each one will support the back of the other. And now you face your back to me and you fall, and we'll catch you. And the person was extremely hesitant to do so. Of course, had we dropped him, we'd been in trouble, but we ensured that we couldn't do that. We had a kind of a brick wall behind us of humans, human wall. And eventually he was persuaded. He fell back. And we caught him naturally. That's a very, very difficult thing for many people. But you see, for a flow to happen, we have to let go. Imagine if I'm holding a small pen in my hand and I clutch onto it forever, then I cannot accept €1,000,000 in my hand. I have to let go. And the principle of letting go is to have some trust, some faith in the universe. The universe is intrinsically peaceful, but we don't find it like that. When we read all the media and the newspapers and everywhere, we find disturbances everywhere. The conflict resolution that we would so much like is not there. And we see it everywhere, big wars, numbers of refugees, so many now. outstripping any other statistic in history. Man's inhumanity to man in the 21st century, the age of amazing technology and rapid communication, despite all of that, much of the world is suffering, either from starvation or undernourishment or homelessness due to wars that ravish towns and so on. And periodically through history, you'll see either minor wars or major ones with small intervals of peace, but not universally everywhere. And the whole universe echoes this. Our own galaxy is sitting in an environment where Andromeda, our next door neighbor, is on a collision course with us. And eventually at some point, there'll be a galactic car accident, and the whole thing will merge into one galaxy. And this has been happening. This has been happening. That is from the emergence of all the galaxies. We're not living in an inherently consistent, peaceful environment. We shouldn't expect it. But that's on what we might call the outside. For convenience sake, we can say outside and the inside. The outside, the world of many people, the world of places and scenes and events. These are all different. These all have to be dealt with and tackled on a rational and on a survival basis, a basis that has to be practical. We can't just divert ourselves in our speech into philosophy. We can't, for example, be a thorough Advaitin and said, never mind, none of this exists. That's an extreme point of view, which doesn't match our reality. Our reality, that we may bang our head against the wall and get a headache, it's a real headache. It's not a pretend headache. It's not an illusion. It's a fact. And the bump on your head will prove it. So how to deal with this life in a peaceful way as a nation, but also as a small field of environment, such as a family, or as an individual. It should surely start off with our individuality. And so every Upanishad will have a peace prayer. Before you study, you should try and create a peaceful environment. The first prayer that we recite is a standard prayer I give at all my talks. And when we look at it, it's highly practical. May that one protect us both. What do we mean by this? There's some supreme thing, some supreme entity that makes a harmonious balance in the whole universe, so that our collision with Andromeda will not happen in our own lifetime. It won't happen, as far as we are aware, for thousands, millions, and billions of years to come. We don't have to get a headache over it now. But everything is working overall in its totality in a rhythmic and harmonious way. What do we mean by God? By God we mean that being that controls things, infuses it with its presence, and brings about some rhythm and harmony that we call laws. All laws have a certain rhythm. That rhythm is put out in mathematics as equations. Everything has to balance out well. That doesn't mean to say we're living in a perfect universe. The nature of the universe itself has to be one of slight asymmetry. Asymmetry must be there, otherwise nothing moves. Let's put it in yogic language. If there are three evolutionary forces in nature that we call Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, that is an element of inertia, an element of violent and active energy, and then some harmonizing element that balances the two. Then you see the overall balancing power that comes out, that inherently, in its own nature, wins over because everything becomes an equation. When we see this equation in nature, we call this law. Irrationally, science has this law from the beginning. Irrationally because in the 19th century, the idea was, or at least even before that, in the 16th century, 17th century, where there was 30 years war in Europe, nobody could decide which god to worship, or in which way, what theology to develop in Europe. And so thinking people said, please sort it out, and while you're sorting it out, we'll attend to this world, and we'll develop a scientific understanding of what is here. And so science inherently became anti-religious, it became materialistic, it became reductionistic, and the emphasis was on that. So when you look at nature in this way and have a military coup against the lawgiver, then you're left with the laws, which is an equivalent thing, because it doesn't ask, where did the laws come from? How is it that they were always there, immutable and eternal? And every scientist, more or less, believes it, that the laws are not evolving. The laws were there always. And so there is a lawgiver, a regulator, something that allows a certain harmony, that knows what it's doing, that knits everything well together, so that everything fits into everything. And the whole thing works in a marvelous way. And from the physics point of view, operates on several constants, over 24 constants, where if one small parameter changes slightly, the whole thing gets disrupted. So we can't say that this world is always peaceful. Peacefulness would be a blank in that case. We're not looking for that kind of peace. Now in our own life, we are looking for peace, and peace is the major issue. Everybody wants peace. Peace is a very fashionable thing to have because the last century was characterized by devastating wars, and nobody wants that again. And so such bodies as League of Nations that developed into United Nations is dedicated to peacekeeping, even by putting military in an area and forcing peace on people. Despite that, there's no peace. And when you see what are the components of disruption and conflict, it boils down to personal characteristics, not national characteristics. Personal characteristics would be that I want power. I want power and I have greed. These two components. The power and greed are the driving forces that create some conflict. And they create conflict not only within us, but they create conflict throughout different nations in different countries. Ultimately, ending in war, utterly selfish. Today, there's no excuse for the kind of war that we are experiencing, where missiles are hurled from a distance, and it's impossible to target them accurately so that no civilian gets involved and affected. The other kind of war is terrorist war. In a terrorist war, the vulnerable section of the population are distinctly targeted. Both of these are cowardly wars. In the ancient days, it wasn't like that. It was more like a chess game. Military fought military, and no other person was affected. So the aspiration is for peace, but sometimes people decide, I'll get peace by waging war and being victorious. Then I'll get the peace. Same thing wherever there's a division. Those religions that espouse peace have previously in history insisted that their individuality is supreme, that the only way to get peace is to assert their individuality and their particular characteristic, their particular uniqueness, what in business called unique selling point. Commercial religion. My religion is better than your religion. Why? We have biscuits after the service. You want biscuits and tea? Join our religion. It's much better. The other religion, you see sackcloth and ashes. Our religion is full of joy. Some evangelists in South America are becoming very popular. They go around the world in jet airplane. You too, you can also get a jet airplane. You just join our religion and get all the wealth. Our God is a God of abundance. I always remember facilitating a group, Palestinians and Jewish people. They wanted me to facilitate somewhere at Trinity College. There were two bodies prepared to dialogue and talk wonderfully in an area of conflict where the vast majority don't want to talk to each other at all. They want a separation. They don't mind Israel and Palestine. In Northern Ireland, you'll find it also. So I said, well, but I'm not Jewish and I'm not Christian. No, for that reason, please facilitate us. So I agreed. Then I remembered Sri Ramakrishna's story about the brothers that fight over land and how God laughs. This is my land. No, this is my land. My children, says God, this is my land. They liked the story very much. But if we're to get peace, we have to stop and we have to drop. This whole idea of ownership, actor and ownership, has to be dropped. It's not I, nor is it mine. When we learn to do that, we now have the influx, steady influx of peace. And it's not that we never find it. It's not that we never have it. In moments, we get the peace. And it doesn't have to be on a mountain. It doesn't have to be in glorious scenery. There we can see the peace. The whole of nature is infused with peace. We can easily get it. But we can't spend all our time in mountains and forests and rivers. Most of our time is spent in a working, waking world that is busy, that is full of potential conflict, where we can easily act and react in a violent way. So how to get some kind of atmosphere of peace, some steadiness in the midst of every environment, and remain absolutely calm, remain unaffected, always remain peaceful within, as if inside you is a deep well of peace that you can easily withdraw to and go there at any moment in time. Some area of poise that can be easily accessed. Is there an area such as that? The Upanishads describe it. It's like a cave. Anyone can resort to it. Anyone can go into it. Well, how do we do that? Well, because we don't have to take consciousness and stream it toward the outside through the avenues of the senses. We can, at any moment in time, stream it inward, become indrawn and withdrawn, and stand in that steady area of poise, detach completely from the eyes and the ears and all the senses, and sit there in that central position of poise. And from there, not only standing there, but we can beam from there also. It becomes an area of distributive illumination. It becomes a fire, and a fire, of course, will find its heat, its warmth, and its light everywhere. You can't fence it in and say, it's only for me. The Bhagavad Gita tells us that there is a way to peace, and we find it in the 12th chapter. In the 12th chapter, it compares different methods. But in the 12th stanza of the 12th chapter, it tells us, Shreyo hi jnanam abhyasat jnanat dhyanam vishishyate jnanat karma phala jagach chantye anantaram. If you have knowledge of something, that's much better than just doing blind practice. Supposing you do some kind of worship unthinkingly because it's traditional or because you think that there's some result from it. That's called superstition. There are many people who engage in religious rituals unthinkingly. So as they're performing it, they're thinking of all their trouble at work, or they're thinking of trouble with a person, or they're thinking maybe of international difficulties even. But to them, it's not important because the action of doing it is a kind of bargaining process also. If you're in trouble, you can then turn around to say to the Lord, okay, Lord, if I do, so many rounds of japa, then please save me. Or and I'll do it for a week. If you don't give it to me within a week, then I have to have a military coup against you. I'll take some other god. You see, a person might even dip into religion like that. Who knows, in the afterlife, if you're a Christian, you might find Buddha in heaven, and then you'll be embarrassed. So you take up Buddhism, you take up Christianity, you take up Islam, kind of insurance policy. There's a kind of philosophy like that. It's called Pascal's wager. So why should we engage in any kind of religious practice or moral behavior? Just in case. Just in case. In case there's a God. I don't necessarily believe there's a God, but just in case, then I'll behave well. Then I'll go to heaven, as it were. We'll have a good conversation. And you say, yeah, but you see, it's unfortunate if it's not the kind of God that you had envisaged. So there's a kind of ritualistic practice that really has no meaning. It becomes a cultural practice, that's all. You light a lamp because your mother did it, her mother did it, and so on. No meaning in it. So better than doing that is knowledge. And will you get peace of mind from these rituals? No, because it doesn't address anything directly. It doesn't make contact with any of the issues. It doesn't make any resolutions. It's only habitual. It's superstition. With a suspicion, if I do this, things will be right. But still that element of doubt will be there. Much better if you do it with an understanding. So that standard tells us that. It tells us that better indeed is knowledge than blind practice. Shreyasi jnanam abhyasat. And better than knowledge is meditation. Better than dealing with things from the intellectual understanding. Dig down deeply and get a real inner understanding of what is there. And that contact, that real meditation, that deeper journey, that is much better. And now that's coming closer to peace. But better than meditation also, it tells us, is the renunciation of the fruit of action. Like that kite that's taking a piece of food and is harassed from left to right and only knows, I'll get peace when it drops it completely. When you drop all activities, that doesn't mean to say you don't work. It doesn't mean to say you resort to a cave. It doesn't mean to say that you become lazy. You stay in bed, come on, get up, get up. No, Bhagavad Gita says I have to renounce all actions. So here I am. Well, sleeping also is an action, and believe it or not, laziness is also an action. And I'm sure at some stage or other you'll want to get up and you'll be hungry and you'll eat, and that's also an action, and you can't avoid it. No, not that kind of thing. But it means renunciation of the fruits. When you plant a fruit tree, you'll get fruit. When you plant vegetables or vegetable seeds, you'll get some result. Sowing and reaping. So whatever effects you have from your work, you renounce the ownership of it. I'm only renting the body. I'm only managing this life on behalf of another. And then all the results belong to that one. Christianity puts it in the slide that you are managing the Lord's vineyard. His vineyard, so all the grapes from the vineyard, they all belong to the owner. Or the Lord gives you some money. Now you see, it's a tricky thing. So there are stewards in the example that Jesus gives. So I'm going away, I come back. Yes, I buried the money. Here's the exact money. Another person, he invested in something and he lost the whole thing. Naturally, he was fired. Another person says, no, I invested it and I've doubled your money and here it is. He was the one who is dearest and he was the one who stayed. So we have to use our investment wisely and double the owner's money and investment and do it out of joy, but always understanding it's not mine. I'm only a steward. I'm only looking after it on behalf of some other being. I'm just the landlord. I'm just looking after it. I'm the caretaker. I'm the caretaker on behalf of the owner. And so renunciation of the fruit of action is the highest. Now here's the interesting thing. What comes next is that anantaram chantir anantanam, peace. Peace immediately follows renunciation. As soon as you give it up, you're immediately peaceful. All your anxiety goes away. All your concern about possessions and debts, it all goes away. Nothing belongs to me. It's not my land. It's not my accommodation. It's not my clothing. It's not my body. It's not my country. Supposing you adopt that, it's not my country. It belongs to the Lord. Immediately peace will follow. No need for conflict. Supposing you do that in the domestic environment. This is a divine house. We register it in the divine name, that's all. We won't even say it's my house. Even the human house, we don't register it as I or mine. We get in the habit of saying this or that or it, or the Lord's earth car, or some other way of describing it. But nothing to do with me. It doesn't belong to me. If we adopted that, then all these quarrels centered around individuality would all go away. Oh, that person, they're a nice person, but their nose is very out of shape. And then that gets back to the person, and the person identifying naturally with the body gets upset and goes and does plastic surgery or something like that. We are so attached to all these things because we're registering us as owners and also as actors. We are doing everything. With the borrowed energy, we take it as our own energy and we're using it as our own, misusing it more than likely, and not getting any peace as a result. So as soon as we put ourselves in the combat zone, either potentially or in actuality, we don't find any peace. Of course, there are other passages. Let us take, for example, let's take one beautiful prayer, by the way. Om Jo Shantir Antiraksham. That prayer that goes like this: unto the heavens be peace. See? Prithivi Shantir, Apa Shanti, like that. Ashodaya Shanti. All of that. May the earth be peaceful. Sky is mentioned. Peace, peace be unto the waters, herbs, the trees, unto all the, here described as gods, but here all the various graces and forces and glories of the divine that display themselves in a subtle way and comes out as the universe that we know. May they be at peace. Unto Brahman and unto all be peace. Truly peace. May we realize this peace. And peace, Shanti, 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 is always repeated 3 times, because what disturbs our peace? 3 things. First thing is ourselves. Our own actions, our own behavior will disturb our peace. Our own state of mind. What state of mind you have, examine it nicely. You may find it's full of anxiety, worry, trauma, thinking about the past events that are gone, therefore not worth addressing. Thinking about the future events which also have not arrived. So it's all dealing with a mythological situation. And the only real situation is here and now. And this is where we'll find the peace, right here, right now. When somebody comes to me in a disturbed way, say depression or some other mental disturbance, I tell them, please go out of the door and tell me what you see. I see just ordinary things, I say, all right, did you notice in detail what was there? Immediately they notice the detail of it, something shifts internally. They realize that grass is growing peacefully, flowers are growing peacefully, the sky is there peacefully, the clouds are drifting peacefully, the sun is beaming peacefully, the moon is rising peacefully. Why can't I see that in myself? Now, supposing a person walks from the door to the chair. What would you see? What did you do? I walked. Okay. Do it again in your imagination, but instead of registering I, somebody else with your name. Sit there and be an observer. Now walk. Now what do you feel? Oh, I feel peace. Because you didn't identify with the body. That's why. You didn't identify with an individuality. That's why. That's why you feel peaceful. And it may only be for a moment until you come back to your original situation, this and that. The Katha Upanishad will have this to say. The one eternal amid the transient, the conscious amid the conscious, the one amid many who grants their desires, to the wise who perceive him as abiding in the soul, to them, what do you think, is eternal peace, and to no others. Let's examine that statement. The one eternal amid the transient. Transient means all the body, mind movements and all the environments that they fit into and correspond with. They're all coming and they're all going. And for that reason, I can observe the comings and goings because I'm remaining static. I don't come, I don't move. I'm simply a witness, and a witness is also an enjoyer. You must have noticed when you witness something and not are tangled up in it, you're also the enjoyer. You witness a scene, you're the enjoyer of it. You witness a play, you're the enjoyer of it. You don't have to worry about learning your lines and whether the scenery is going to fall down or whether the people will like it or not. So, that one eternal amid the transient, the conscious amid the conscious. There's two areas of conscious. I was asked at the weekend, please tell me, what is consciousness? Well, there are two varieties of it. Consciousness is a hard problem, says David Chalmers, the Australian philosopher. Because if you think that consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the brain, it will be difficult. There's an objective consciousness called awareness. And we can, if we want to investigate it by opening up the brain and analyzing it to death, we won't find it. Because consciousness has no boundaries. And so, no doubt you can isolate certain manifested areas of consciousness through operations of the brain or isolating sections of the hippocampus or something like that. But these are all the effects. Something like a light bulb. You can't say the light bulb is shining. It looks like that, but there's an electrical current behind it and it requires a contact. When you switch it on, it manifests itself through the light bulb. The light bulb is simply an adapter. So you can imagine this glory that's everywhere, tapped into various adapters, it becomes manifested as this transient world. We can't say or give the attribute to the adapter, to the light bulb. You can switch the light bulb off and then it doesn't do anything. You can remove it from its socket, it doesn't do anything. So there's a world of birth, life and death full of adapters. Sun is an adapter, moon is an adapter. Adapters everywhere, and on the other side we call it limiting adjuncts. The light bulb is manifesting light, no doubt, but it is limiting the full glory of the electrical current behind it. In the electromagnetic wave system, always present, that can be tapped into at different wavelengths, different frequencies, and manifested not only as light, but also as heat, and many other things, radio waves, for example. So the conscious amidst the conscious, something seems to be conscious, look behind it again, there you'll find the real consciousness, the one amid the many. It's the many that gives us the difficulties. Who grants their desires. Yes, anything you desire It shifts itself and arranges in the cosmos whatever you want. To the wise who perceive him as abiding where? As abiding in the soul, in the heart, in the very core of man. To them is eternal peace, and to no other. When you have the insight and see that steady thing, which is the embodiment of peace, the peace, as it were, that passes all understanding. It's not a temporary peace. It's not a truce. It's an inherent thing. It's always there. It's always in the depth of your being, standing there, waiting to be tuned into, acknowledged, and then beamed everywhere. So that's the one passage that we find in the Katha that directly tells us about peace. And what we find in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, when somebody has an absence of concentration, there is also an absence of peace. And there are the symptoms, physical symptoms, shaking, grief, irregular breathing, upset of the nervous system. So there's no peace within the body because there's no peace within the mind. How to cultivate that peace? Subtler than the subtle, greater than the great, says the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. That is the self, that immortal, peaceful, that aspect which is eternally peace itself, not peaceful as an attribute, that is set in the cave of the heart. Of the creature, one beholds him as being actionless and becomes freed from sorrow, when through the grace of the Creator he sees the Lord and his majesty. Is it possible to know? Yes. The next passage goes on. Vedaham etam ajjaram. I know this undecaying, ancient, primeval self. And it's not just myself, it's self of all, present in everything, on account of infinity, of whom they declare there is stoppage of birth. The expounders of Brahman proclaim him to be eternal. It's not so for those who are foolish and think that they are being born and they're dying. Another passage is there, and this is from the Isha Upanishad. Yasmin sarvam bhutani. When to one who knows all beings have truly become one with his own self, there's nothing to oppose you, nothing to disturb you. A dreamless sleep is peaceful because there's no second person to disturb you. You're there sleeping, not aware of snoring or anything like that. You don't require a visa to go there. Pure holiday, where nothing is there except an element of peace. No division, no time, no space, no sense of ego, nothing to combat. No one to boss you around, no one to pay rent to, nobody to wage war with. When to one who knows all beings have truly become one with his own self, then what delusion and what sorrow can be to him who has seen this oneness? Then such a person, of course, will be completely free from the delusion that upsets peace. What is the source of disturbance and conflicts, therefore? Why should we not get peace? It is purely because of our ignorance, purely because we put ourselves in an area and assume that every other person, place, and event has to be reacted to. And we have to then make a combat zone, bravely fighting on our own, as it were, with no assistance or help from anybody else, with a jumping mind and a body that is liable to be riddled with COVID and disease and so on. Some unreliable entity like that and a jumping mind trying to deal with other things in the universe and becoming frustrated and not finding any peace because we are starting from an area of disturbance. We should start from an area of peace. We should work from inside out. When we work from inside out, things become different. That inner peace permeates now everywhere, permeates the mind, permeates the body, and permeates the environment. Where does it start? It starts by sitting down nicely. Of course, in parallel with that, we have to carry that attitude toward the workplace, toward the place where we interact with other things that are likely to disturb us. Consider the mind like a lake. A lake can erupt into a terrible, disturbing series of waves. There's a huge man-made lake in, actually the two lakes come to mind. One is in Malawi. Malawi is the third largest lake in Africa. Something like about 500 kilometers long and about 50 kilometers wide. It's a narrow lake. When you go on that lake, even though it's landlocked, it has its independent weather because the water is so vast. And if you're caught out in the middle, you'll have waves that can just engulf a boat. And then all of a sudden it just disappears. Even more so than in the ocean, in a sense, that there are confines to the lake. And so a wind can come and whip up the waves and knock your boat over. If you're constantly in a storm, you won't be at peace. If you constantly have stormy relationships, you won't be at peace. If you constantly are like a prickly pear where you are sensitive and somebody says good morning and you say, what do you mean by that? What are you trying to say? What are you trying to imply? Then you will not get the peace. There has to be a shift in your behavior where peace is inherently natural to you. A base where you can resort to, where you can withdraw to, something that is within you and is you. And you catch it, you catch a glimpse of it, as it were, in a dreamless sleep. The difference between a dreamless sleep is, a dreamless sleep is a passive state. Passive means you go into it a fool, you come out a fool. But there's an inherent internal self that is poetically called within the cave of the heart, of the size of a thumb, poetically it's put. It's not that it's actually the size of the thumb, it's there for meditation purposes. You go withdraw into that and stand there, getting used to doing that. You can do it in the midst of all the traffic. You can do it in the midst of the most awkward and difficult situation. And then on the other side, you can have an attitude where that is in everyone else. Seeing the self in all beings and all beings in the self is only the formula I have. I don't have any other formula. And when you see that in all beings with a sense of love, abundant love for all those, then there will be absolutely no disturbance in the lake of the mind. The lake of the mind can be disturbed in many different ways, but maintain in equilibrium, because underneath the waves at the greatest depth, you won't find the storm there. It is all calmness. So learn to dive down, dive deep, and see what's there. It's not running away. Make no mistake about that. Some people think, oh, that's being unrealistic. That's withdrawing to the point of ignoring your problems and difficulties. No, it's not that kind of thing. Because it can last a moment. A flash of realization, in devotional language, Lord, there you are there, dressed up in this way. Thank you, salutations to you. I noticed you and I adore you. That's on the one side. On the one side, seeing it in yourself. On the other side, seeing it in others and responding in that same way. Then you'll be nothing more than an overflowing vessel of love for everyone, everywhere. How will you combat that? And if you are as peaceful as a wall, then people can try and upstage that and upset that and combat that. They'll get a headache. There can be nothing more solid and peaceful than the wall. Try battering your head against it, see what happens. You alone will get a headache. The wall will just stand there. What is this fool doing? The Homer Simpson moment, what you call it. Bang your head against the wall and say, do, and do it again. Do it again, repeatedly, each one, do, Do it again. Or a distraction called the butterfly effect. Oh, let's do this. Oh, a butterfly, off he goes. We are easily distracted. It's our distraction, lack of concentration, that disturbs the peacefulness that is inherently in the mind. That's on the one hand. And it is assuming that what we are battling against is something different from us, forgetting the holistic nature of life. There is no difference between you and the other. One is one side of the coin, you are the other side of the coin. When you do it to this, you're doing it to yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. Why? Because your neighbor is yourself. You just didn't notice it. When you learn to notice it, you won't do anybody any harm. That doesn't mean to say you won't play the drama. It doesn't mean to say you'll be foolish. It doesn't mean to say you'll be the doormat. It doesn't mean to say people should take great advantage of you and step all over you and you become an ineffective pacifist. No, because on the other side of it, life is a game. Life is a play, and you engage in it with full vigor, but not understanding, oh, I'm the part that is being played. You get close to it, no doubt, but always maintaining that sense of self-identity, always engaging in that peace that passes all understanding. And that peace is in you, and that peace is in others. And what we call the eternal self, the Atman, another word for it can just as well be peace. If you are peaceful there, you're peaceful everywhere. Then in the depths of your heart during meditation, you can find and access that area of that peace that passes all understanding. And that can serve as a stalwart, as a buffer zone for engaging elsewhere, a reminder, always remembering, that was the peace I got. I am that, always. And then looking with the penetrating vision into others and seeing that same element of poise that we call the eternal self, that doesn't move, that has no motion, that is peace itself. When we say pure being, we're saying that is the foundation for everything else. The implication is holistic. It'd be the same everywhere. When we say that it's consciousness, we're saying it's an expression, like the light expressing itself through the light bulb. The light bulb itself is not the conscious entity. There's a correlation between the light bulb and the current. That's all there is, correlation. There's a correlation between the mind and consciousness and the brain. A correlation. It's not that the brain is consciousness or any area of the brain is consciousness. You investigate it in any way you like, you won't find it. And so there's a famous neuroscientist, I always forget her name, she's a Dane. It'll come to me shortly. So she's trying to investigate what is the consciousness and comes to the same conclusion as the yogis came across, using the analogy of a lake that erupts into different waves. And the only way to control it will be to control the impact of what you feed in and the enormity of the thing you feed in. If you have a lake and you throw a small pebble in, then the pebble makes a few disturbances. If you throw a big thing in and make a big issue, then not only does it create huge waves, but the waves go and affect everything else. You must have noticed at Port Marnock how it works when a speedboat comes past or a ferry and a normal placid wave system. You can not exactly surf on it, but you can see the difference, There was certainly some young boys who went into the Roman Catholic confessional box, and they said, listed a whole lot of sins that they had done. I've done this, I've done the other, and I threw pebbles in the river. And the priest said, all right, but doesn't seem an offense to me. It's not, there's no harm in throwing pebbles in the river. Everybody did. I myself do it. The second boy comes along, lists the whole thing, a whole group of anomalies and sins and what have you. At the end says, and I threw pebbles in the river. And the priest says, that's not an issue. It's okay to throw pebbles in the river. Like that, 4 boys, and they all end up. And I threw pebbles in the river. Very mystified. Eventually, a 5th boy comes along, lists a whole lot of things. I stole here, I lied there, I did this, I did that. Didn't you throw pebbles in the water? No, 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 Father. I am pebbles. So that was reminded me of this throwing pebbles and stones in the water. It depends how heavy you put it and with what momentum you throw it will produce the number of waves. Now, if we use that as an example, and that is the example now used in scientific investigation with regard to the brain and consciousness. You can't locate it anyway. It's not like that. The waves are everywhere. But the enormous thing that you can make a mountain out of a molehill. You can take a small issue and you can exaggerate it tremendously and make a huge deal of it. You can, forgive and forget. There are some people who say, oh, I can forgive, but I cannot forget. Well, if you can't forget, you didn't forgive. So all the time we chew the cud of resentments, all the time, chew over the past. Oh, my samskaras, or bring up this issue or that issue. And then sometimes enjoy bringing it up and mulling it over because you like the company of psychologists or something like that. And you always want to know what is wrong with me, or you think there's something wrong with me. You chew over and over and over again. A cow has every justification for chewing the cud endlessly. It has 4 stomachs, but we only have 1 stomach. And we should be able to stomach any form of humiliation. It's only transient. It comes and it goes. Never mind, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what people say. Doesn't matter what people think. I'm immune to it, you should say. So we have these issues and we exaggerate them and make huge issues over it and throw it into our consciousness pond, disturbing the peace of the mind with enormous waves unnecessarily put. We could reduce that and no doubt put a small pebble in, and that will have a small effect, manageable, and then leave it, but mainly to put a counter wave in. What is that counter wave? It's full of all the noble, highest values of truth and goodness and beauty and love and harmony. Learn the art of doing that. So as I said in a talk recently, I can't remember which, what is salvation? It's a minimum of 51% purity, nobility, sattva, and 49% other things. We can never get 100% sattva. 100% sattva, you won't be alive. The world will have gone. We need tamas. Without tamas, how would we sleep? We need rajas. Without rajas, how can we engage in any activity? But we need overriding sattva. And we need to convert the others into that. That's the wave that we put, and that neutralizes all the other negative waves. Negative waves means egocentric positions all the time. This is what creates the peace. A neutralization of this is where we get our peace. The peace that passes understanding. Should we stand in peaceful, outwardly peaceful scenes, nature scenes, where we engender peace, where we drink in the peace, where we become peaceful? Of course, by all means. But make sure that it goes into the memory filing cabinet, the library there, where we can recall these peaceful scenes for meditation and in order to stabilize the mind. Don't just think, I am peaceful when I go to this place, but can you live in that place forever? Supposing you decide, oh, I would like to, I know where I'll be absolutely peaceful. I know a desert island near Tahiti. I think I can go there. And so beautiful. The waves are so beautiful. The scent of the air, pristine, untouched nature is there. Coconuts are there, plenty of food. The fish are there. And the ocean is an azure blue color. It's like a picture postcard. And I can live there happily for all my life. What a wonderful place. An ideal desert island. You forgot about the mosquitoes. You forgot about the sandflies. You forgot about the sharp coral that cuts your foot. You must have known yourself. You must have seen that Robinson Crusoe. how much he suffered on such an island in idyllic conditions. And I often wonder, all those people who live in Tahiti and Hawaii, where do they go on holiday? I don't know. So we have this ideal of a peaceful place, but are unable to bring that peace into our normal working, waking life, where there will always be some disturbances. But should we register them as disturbances? Or should we register them as wonderful waves that present themselves to us, challenging our ability to cope with them and find a way around them nicely? Like any animal or any institution like that, like a dog or a horse. You don't do it, you don't tackle it directly. You look at a dog, the dog will look at you and want to bite you. No, you look away and you put your hand out, it licks it a little bit, sniffs it a little bit, then nuzzles up to you, investigating, looking at you all the time, trying to evaluate, are you a threat? Are you a friendly person? And then you move your fingers to the back of the ear and tickle a little bit and stroke and pat. Now it's your friend, wants to jump on your lap and lick your face. So this is the way we tackle all the waves in life, with a calm, equal attitude, because internally that is our nature. That means then that we can have a nature which is not upset by what is called pairs of opposites, hot or cold, praise or blame, good or bad. Any of these pairs of opposites, virtue or vice, any of these, none of it will upset us. Our equilibrium will be absolutely steady, and we will be an overflowing cup of bliss as a result. And we will spread that by virtue of our being. It will spread everywhere. Why not? Why not be a peacemaker? Blessed are the peacemakers, says Jesus in Sermon on the Mount. There was a disruption once in one of the ashrams in Swami Brahmananda's time. And all the inmates were going to be expelled. And Brahmananda said, please don't do that, I'll come there. So he goes there, and he doesn't mention any of the incidents. And he says, the only one thing you do when I meditate, please meditate with me. So all of them did that. And all of them drank in the atmosphere inherent there, atmosphere of calm and peace that he spread by his presence. By the time he left, all issues had been resolved. Now, there are many situations that are turbulent and not peaceful. But if we can shift our attitude and look at it in a different way, we see there's an undercurrent of peace there. We just didn't notice it. And where we find peace, we find love, we find understanding, we find compassion, we find empathy, we find all these other virtues are there. So I want to make this as interactive as possible anyway, as usual. So I have maybe a few more moments where you can talk a little bit more about peace. By peace, we don't mean a piece of cake, because that will disturb your molecular peace a little bit as well. piece of pie or something. That's another thing, though. You see, we disturb our peace by resorting to things which we think will solve the issue, but of course it's only short term and it doesn't really solve anything. Okay, all right, so just to summarize them before we leave off. The subject was a way to peace. Is there a way to peace? Granted the fact that if we look for a way to peace, we're not at peace ourselves. Yes, there is a way to peace. The way is inward. And when we take a journey, an inward journey inwards, there we find our peace that passes all understanding. When we find it in ourselves, we'll find it everywhere. And we will drop the idea of anything belonging to us. In this way, we become peaceful, just to summarize. And just finally, I was also mentioning this shanti, shanti, shanti. So there are three ways that disturb our peace. One is from our own actions. Secondly is other people against us. In any case, we can keep our equilibrium. seeing the divine everywhere. And then thirdly is whatever happens. If you ask what was the cause of a tsunami that took so many lives, well, the cause was there's a disruption in the crust of the earth, and that is part of nature's way to create some kind of balance, and a volcanic eruption under the sea, and then a wave develops, and when it hits the shallow part of the land, it causes a back effect that mounts up and creates a wave, and that comes on and destroys humans, not animals, because animals were sensitive enough to go to higher ground. But the humans weren't. The humans decided they'll stand and take photographs of it, and then they perished. So what is the cause? Is it God's wrath? Is the fact that they did something wrong? No. This was part of a natural cause, and they could have avoided it had they so chosen, had they become so close to nature that they responded as every other of the animals responded. Then they would have saved themselves and saved sufferings for their families. So there are three things. The last is, we might call it the insurance type of peace, act of God. So we say Shanti, Shanti, Shanti 3 times, so that we imbue ourselves with peace, make ourselves peaceful, and therefore we'll get peace. Secondly, make sure that everybody else is peaceful also, so that I don't get caught up in their disturbance, in their warfare. And thirdly, peace due to disruptions from nature, natural causes. And when we repeat that, we're pushing an intention, stirring up a cosmic mind that will produce a good effect for us. That is why there's so many peace prayers, and every Upanishad begins with one. So, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thank you.